just about a month, maybe a month and a half ago, I found out through Bob Weiner's email system that Tom Bullen was starting what he called an artistic history of the old King's Road, wherever that is. There are lots of King's Roads, and Tom finally found it on the map, I think. And what we're doing is identifying all of the homes that are still left, and we have not had a good record for restoration, as you all know. We've lost too many of the good colonial homes. But Tom, I think, has had a great thought with respect to restoring history from the standpoint of our colonial times. What I'm doing, we now have 4 people involved. Tom doing the artwork, watercolor, artistic renditions of the various colonial homes down through the colonial period to present time. And I'm kind of writing the history for each of those buildings, and if anyone can identify those buildings, please let us know what you know about them. Also, we have 2 other ladies, Charlotte and Trin, who are related to the Grubb family and the Vandiver family, and they're helping us with some research to tie this whole picture together. I don't know what Tom's forecast is for completion, but we're working on it intensely, and we hope to have something good for you one of these days soon.
So how is the Grubb family tied in?
Well, the Grubb family, I have a good picture of the Grubb mansion, and Carolyn is smiling because, should I go on and give my whole discussion?
Why don't you give make abbreviated, if you can keep it to 10 minutes, because we want to try to...
I'll do that, Mr. Moderator, panel. Ladies and gentlemen who are interested in building the history of Brandywine Hundred in Newcastle County. I'm sitting between 2 distinguished individuals here. James Hanby on my left, he and I come from the same line of the earliest Forwoods, William and Maria Forwood, in the early 1700s, 18th century, on the border there. So we have something in common, and I went to visit with James and his family and had a delightful time talking about history, and there's no end to the Forwood, Grubb, and Stidham families. On my right is Garet Magnus's daughter, and I should relate to you that I had the opportunity of coaching the Garet Magnus baseball team years ago. And my best favorite second baseman is sitting on the floor in front of us, and he was also a star rifleman in the Marine Corps. His name is Garet Gunther, my eldest son. He's embarrassed to take a bow.
I played for Magnus Little League team, though, which was sponsored by Magnus Construction.
Right. I'm not going to throw all of this at you because Bob won't let me. But when I was here, less than a year ago, I was leaving this library, going out onto Foulk Road, and the telephone rang, and it was Bob. And I turned left, and he says, "No, turn right," and come down to see me. So 2.5 hours later, the interview of myself, Bob, and Carolyn, I was exhausted that day because they also turned me over to Kim Burdick, who is building history in the Brandywine Hundred area. What I really wanted to talk to you about today are, how many of you were at my July 9th meeting, or Carolyn's meeting, where she invited me to talk about the Grubb mansion and the Grubb family? About a half a dozen. That was a warm summer night at the Robinson House, which is not ideal for large crowds like this. But we had over 60 people come to hear about the Grubb family, and I was amazed. But There would have been more, except that there was a mistake in the newspaper, standpoint of the date. So what I want to talk to you about mainly now is Robert Forwood. At that meeting, I talked about the Grubb mansion and Harriet Forwood. Robert Forwood married Harriet in 1830. 1830 is a significant date, particularly from the standpoint of the fact that Robert was a Quaker, and the Quakers had their big split in Chichester meeting, I believe it was, Jenny? Concord meeting. And they split from the Orthodox Quakers, the Hicksite Quakers. And I think that that was the beginning of the change in the Quaker faith. That is, lots of people left the Quaker faith from that time on. Is that right, Helen? Yes. Helen is at Widener. She was at our program at the Robinson House. So going on with respect to Robert Forwood, I wanted to talk to you about 4 or 5 of his relatives. Robert had 2 wives. His first wife died. Her name was Bishop, Margaret Bishop. And she must have been a really accomplished lady because she had a great family. Robert was married to Harriet Grubb, and it was both their second marriages. Their first husbands had died, or first spouse had died. Interestingly, we find that Harriet Grubb was buried not with Robert, her husband, whom she married in 1830. She was buried at the St. Martin's Cemetery in Marcus Hook, where there are 20 Grubbs, at least 20 Grubbs there. And her tombstone is still pretty obvious. And Robert, on the other side, which I want to talk to you more about today, he had an older sister by the name of Lydia Forwood. Lydia married Eli, or Elihu Talley. Lydia and Elihu had a daughter by the name of Sarah Talley. Sarah was quite a gal. She was considered the belle of the state of Delaware. She must have been gorgeous. And you can bear this out, perhaps in this library. If you look at the Talley book on page 44, there is a discussion of Sarah Talley and her beauty.
What is this Talley book?
Does she have it?
It's called The History of...
There it is.
Of the Talley family.
History of the Talley family, and it's on file.
1899.
It's on file here at the library. I think it's being kept behind the desk because of concerns about security, but the book is available for research.
They also have a book at the historical on Market Street, and there's also one in Dover at Archives.
Very good. Continue, Mr.
Okay.
Gunther.
I'm glad you have that book. Now you can bear me out at page 44.
I've read it.
So the others I wanted to talk to you about is, of course, Sarah Talley. Robert had his youngest son. I think he had 6 children, he and his wife, Bishop, Margaret Bishop. And the youngest child of Robert's family was Robert II. Before I tell you this, I should also mention that Sarah Talley married Joseph Grubb. Joseph Grubb being the older son, brother of Harriet Grubb. So, this is a case where Robert had a niece named Sarah Talley through his sister, and Harriet had a sister-in-law through her brother, Joseph. I know these things get a little tangled, so I won't linger on that. But Robert's youngest son, Robert II, it so happens that he fell in love with a lady from Media, Pennsylvania. Her name was Rachel Way Larkin. The Larkins came originally from Maryland, and Carol knows about them. They came to Pennsylvania and had woolen mills near Media. Very successful businesses. So what happens, Robert fell in love with Rachel Way Larkin. So Rachel went to her friend's meeting to get permission to marry Robert, and they refused her. This was also in 1829, 1830. So she didn't give up very easily. She went down to Wilmington to 4th and West on Quaker Hill, and finally got permission from that friend's meeting to marry Robert Forwood, who at that time, I think, he moved out of being a Quaker and became a Presbyterian. I'm really not sure of that, but I think so. So, it so happens that combination they lived here in Brandywine Hundred, Robert and Rachel, for a short time. She was a conscientious objector for sure, out of her Quaker faith. And she would not see any of her 3 children become involved in warfare. So what did she do? She trained them to be opposed to warfare, and each of the 3 of them became medical doctors, where they could serve in the war but not kill. One of those medical doctors was Jonathan Larkin Forwood, who was a surgeon, a renowned surgeon in Chester, Pennsylvania. The other one was William Henry Forwood, who was a Civil War forgotten hero, who became the Surgeon General of the United States Army in 1902. We have an abundant amount of information on both of those medical doctors, but Jenny is looking at me and she's holding in her hand an unusual piece of a physician's wares.
It says physician's visiting list, 1880.
1880. This was the youngest son, the youngest of the 3. His name was John Forwood. All 3 of these medical doctors, brothers, had graduated from the University of Pennsylvania. William Henry Forwood graduated just in time for the Civil War. John, we kind of lost track of him, but I understand that he was a very brilliant individual. He had a kind of a calm practice in Philadelphia, but did a lot of country work in Concord Township. And I was amazed when Jenny came up with this most unusual data kind of a book for a physician who took care of patients all over the countryside.
I worked for an auctioneer for 30 years and I picked up various things.
Great.
So Garet, this Mr. Forwood, who became the Surgeon General for the Army, helped found Walter Reed Hospital, which was named after him before it became Walter Reed Hospital.
Well, he worked in the research facility there and was, he worked for the Surgeon General at that time, and he was one of the originators of Walter Reed Hospital.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
And he went to the Forwood School.
He went to the Forwood School also for the short time that they lived here. I think his 2 brothers went for a short time also before they moved over into Pennsylvania. But that's a very interesting family. And John was apparently a brilliant individual who really served the public. And he was also in the Civil War for a short time. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Forwood School, particularly since our moderator is interested in Ewald Street. I also met Ewald and his wife Eleanor. I don't know when they passed away. Do you remember?
John?
5 years ago?
Was it 5 years ago?
5 years ago.
I met them here on Wilson Road at their farm and had a delightful conversation with them. And they told me that they went also to the Forwood School, not as your contemporary. Do you have any pictures of the Forwood School?
Yeah, but I can't find them. If I find them, I'll give them to Bob. And
Please do.
Yeah.
I've posted pictures of my interview with Ewald Streed's brother and sister on my website, bobweiner.com. I'll be happy to post pictures as well. We did a walkthrough through the farm shortly after Newcastle County began to rehabilitate the home and make it integrated into the park. So it's a great opportunity for us to share some of these pictures and make them available to everyone. But Mr. Streed had both apples and peaches, and he had horses, and we were very fortunate that he was willing to allow the county to purchase his farm as well, to join the Talley and the Day Farm to make this great county park that we have.
Yes, Ewald Streed, his father was Carl, and I should point out that Bob has a very interesting website story on the Streed family.
Actually, it was written by Jim Parks of Delaware. I posted Jim's article with attribution to my website along with the pictures, and you can go and read that article that was written maybe 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, so please look at that website. It's very interesting. As I say, there was a very interesting conversation with Ewald and Eleanor because they had attended the Forwood School. I have been concerned about the Forwood School for some time, and I knew that Bob Weiner was working on it to get restoration. And I think it would be a great idea if we could get all of you behind it to move that school over here into Talley Park, because they have not been able to rezone where it is behind the Magnus Shopping Center.
It's called the Grayling Crest. Well, we call it the Grayling Crest Shopping Center. It's been renamed the Shops at Grayling, but the old timers know it as Grayling Crest.
Yeah, when they were building that little shopping mall, they made a big mistake by tearing down that revolutionary stone wall all along that woods. And it's really a shame how we have let these things go by. I wanted to just mention for a minute, and I'll sit down, Bob. The first time you interviewed me, though, was 2.5 hours, remember?
Thank you very much.
I wanted to mention Dr. Lee Anderson, whom I have been in touch with here recently because of the great work that she's done on this, on the Riverview Cemetery, her book, and also the campaign that she ran on February 16th, I think it was, Lee, where she had the whole community around 32nd and Market come out on both sides of Market Street to clean up the Riverview Cemetery. And they did a great job, right? I think we should consider this for other cemeteries, particularly St. Martin's. And I've been talking to Lee about the possibility of getting a book together on St. Martin's, particularly since we have 20 Grubbs buried in that grave from my standpoint. And there are many other interesting individuals. And now I'll sit down and make Bob happy.
Susan Magnus will go next, but Tom Talley has
Can I
a...
ask Forwood a question?
Yes, identify your name, please.
Hi, I'm Janet Farina, and I live in a community called Forwood. It's only one road between it's off Silverside between Marsh and Green Acres. But we're in a house, it was built in 1940, it's a stone house. We were told there was a farmhouse there that burnt down, and we are now that the house we're in, it was built on top of it. Would you have any idea if this is right or not? Or
Where is it located?
it's called Forwood. It's across from Westwood Manor. It's a one-street development, and it's right after you go past Veal. There's Stony Run, and then there's Forwood. It's before Green Acres. Nobody knows that it's only one road, but there's a house that was built in 1940. But we were told there was a farmhouse underneath,
the old Forwood farmhouse was there.
Was there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
A stone house, they tore it down.
Okay, thank you.
I don't remember his first name, though. You?
Which Forwood it was?
Was it Walter Forwood?
Walter Forwood did live there, but I don't think he built the home.
Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody
You have
before
another
him.
question?
Excuse me, was there anything called the Allen property?
Well, the Allen property was the original Forwood property where Pizza Hut is now.
Yes.
Wasn't that the one that burnt down this lady's talking about?
No, that's another
Oh.
one.
No, the
It
Allen
was-
property,
It was owned by the Forwood when.
Yeah.
when it-
the rest of the property behind the Pizza Hut, by the way, is a county park. For those of you who don't know, that wooded area, and Newcastle County purchased it and left it as passive open space. So it's one of the gifts that we all own, and we thank Newcastle County for having had the foresight to purchase it.
Bob, just one
Yes.
more thing. Since you mentioned that property, I think that was Joseph Forwood on Marsh and Wilson
Oh, God.
Road.
The Forwood.
And this is what has been happening all along with respect to our lack of restoration. That was one of the most gracious colonial homes in the whole Brandywine area. And I think we have an attestation to that here.
Yes.
That home, they tried to preserve it back in the 1950s. The people who owned it were caring for it, and they wanted to sell it to others, but it went the way of all construction. And it's now another piece of parlor. Can you imagine we let that happen?
Right.
Makes me sad.
Okay, was there one other hand back here? Your name, please?
My name is Beverly Suarez Beard. I live in Fairfax. I'm curious about the family that owns the Highland Orchards. And that
The
That's
Webster.
the that's the
Websters.
That's the
Webster's,
Yes.
okay,
John C.
and
Webster.
that his, there's an old home there, I see
Yes.
an old building.
It's the four generations live in the home. The Webster Linton family. They have full intentions of continuing to run it as a farm. They have a larger farm in Pennsylvania, and they continue to sell farm goods to the benefit of all of us who live in the area.
Yeah, I go
Right.
there.
There's no intention for them to go out of
I'm
business.
so glad. It's one thing, one little piece
Yes.
that's been saved.
Right. Yes.
Mr. Webster had four daughters, no sons, and all the farms.
They were all musicians.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yes.
I tried to date them, and they wouldn't date me.
That's a shame.
Andy Talley again.
Two things. You're talking about Forwood, and I did neglect to mention this. My granddad taught school there. Penrose R. Talley.
Well, maybe he must have taught, my aunt, Mrs. Duffield, taught there before, Miss Fink, who taught me in the early 30s.
Now, he didn't teach you then.
And
Not my
Duffield
Penrose.
taught there in the 20s. So he
Penrose,
must have taught there
he
before
could
that.
have been there then, but my dad also went there. There used to be a lady on Silverside Road, Laura Oskins.
Was she?
She went to school there. You had to know Laura.
Well, Laura
She used to
married-
work for my
She had a
dad,
sister, Emma.
Emma.
Well, one
Yeah,
of those girls married,
It was Emma Graff, and then
Emma Graff.
she married Deball Street.
one of those girls married.
Emma Graff.
Okay.
Emma Graff, what's being said is Emma Graff, Graff, married Ewald Street.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Well, she went to Forwood.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we had a reunion, there were, I don't know how many still.
She went to Forwood with my dad.
But there's an article about this written by Jim Parks of Delaware, which you can see on the website. Okay, let's move along.
Let me hit you one more
Oh,
quick one.
Andy, one of
They
the.
brought up the Webster Farm. Of course, where Perth is, all up and back of the farmhouse.
Pembroke, Perth.
Perth was all part of the Webster Farm. Then they decided to cut back on the farming there, and Lawrence Talley helped develop that for John Webster's family. But Elizabeth, next to the youngest daughter, she was very adventuresome in her young days. And one day she decided to home break her horse and brought it to the kitchen, much to her father's dismay.
I might add, Windsor Hills across the Foulk Road here was part of Webster's farm too.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we're going to hear from Suzanne Magnus, who's tied into many of the historic families. Of course, many of us live in houses that were built by her father, Garet Magness. I told Suzanne, of course, I live in a Magnus-built home now in Chatham, and we thank you for your dad's art of building a house. It's a sturdy house. I lived in Perth before, and then Green Meadow before, when we used to watch Ewald Street with his horses and when my kids were small. So many of us, of course, share memories and can tell stories as I can as well.